All right, we're going to go into sequencing. And the first change that Gil made is obviously we're doing we do the 50 milliseconds. So he's added this quick start, which lets you quickly jump through and get sequencing. By default, it shows you all models. So if you click on the quick start, it will give you a sequence with all of your models here. That can be useful. It can also be annoying because sometimes if you've got lots of models, you end up with just an awful lot there. But you can also start with empty. Do a quick start, and that's more the classic way in which people have started their sequences. The other thing I wanted to show here is in the timings. I've added a new timing called Metronome, and in Metronome pops up and lets you define a timing which can't be less than 50 because that's the timing of the sequence, but I can go in and define an arbitrary timing amount. So let's say 1000 milliseconds, which is a second. Now this effectively has to be a multiple of 50 because if it's not, the frames won't line up, and so it will just round it. If I said this was 999, it would round it to 1000. And if I click on that, it goes and creates me a timing track, which is every second it puts a timing mark. So now you can create a timing track with any frequency at all. There used to be people editing XML files and changing timings to try and get that to work. The Metronome now lets you go and create a timing track with an arbitrary amount of time between them. Video export. So this was created. So an individual uses LOR, and he wanted to do an export. So I don't know if you know this, but you can take a model like this matrix and you can export the model, and you can export it to an LOR clipboard, and then you can take that clipboard over to LOR and you can paste it in. I'm not exactly sure how, but you can. The problem with it is there's actually real limitations, and if you're using large matrices or things like that, it gets out of hand very quickly. But one thing LOR can do as well is play video, and so we now give you the ability to export uncompressed video of this model. And it only works with models which are rectangular. It'll work with custom models, which can produce some interesting thoughts, but also matrices and trees and the like, which are all rectangular. And it renders it out to an AVI file. Now this is not going to look right. It looks very fuzzy. It's even fuzzy on my screen. I'm sure it's fuzzy on yours. But this is actually a video file that is the exact dimensions of my matrix. But in this case, my matrix, which is, no, it's this one here, is 16 strings, so it's 16 high by 50 wide. And so that video file that I just created is actually exactly those dimensions. So if you take that video, let's go back to our sequence. Let's go and do something really radical. Let's delete that. Let's go and grab the video effect and drop it down. It's got a red background because there's no video file. Let's browse for a video file. Oh, I have a video file. And there you go. It's brought in the butterfly from that video file. And as you can see, the butterfly is pixel perfect, right? There is absolutely no compression. There's no artifacts. There's no loss, etc. And so if you need to, if it's useful for you to take a video and replay it on another model at another time, you can now save a model as a video. Like I say, it's not great for playing it back. The reason for that, why does it look so bad here? It's all got to do with the video players. These things aren't designed to play videos that are that small. Count of layers in the presets window. Okay, so I don't know if you remember, but let's go and create a preset. So we'll put a couple of effects here. We'll highlight them. we'll right click and we'll go to effect presets. We'll create a new preset. I don't know, XXX. And here in the brackets, it tells me that this preset needs 2 layers. Right, this one here needs 7 layers. So if I wanted to put them onto, I don't know, onto my bulb, I would need to go and create 7 layers. Because if I don't, and I come over here and I insert it, you can see that as I insert it, it goes and spreads out over to the models underneath. So if you're using them and knowing how many layers a particular preset has is obviously helpful. Allow effects to be dropped without timing marks when a timing mark is active. So if I create on this timing track a timing mark, it used to be if I went to try and drop something, I could only drop it inside these timing marks. Now you can drop it outside the timing marks and it will default to a second long. If you drop it within the timing marks, it will spread out to fill the timing mark. And add effect alignment options. Okay, so this is kind of cool. So if I unselect my timing track, and I select these 3 things, there's now an alignment menu. And you have to control select them. I come down here to alignment and I can say align the start times and it aligns them all up. To, I think it was the last one I selected is how it lined it up. It can also do things like make them the same length and things like that. So sometimes when you're mucking around trying to get things right and line them up, that will be a little bit quicker. Okay, so the text effect is now 1 line only. So if you're putting your text effect on a matrix, there's no longer multiple lines of text. You only get 1 line. All the usual options, none of the options have changed, but you only get 1 line of text. You used to get 4. If you want a second line, of course, it's straightforward to do. You just create a second layer and drop another text effect. Of course, you may want to play with the Y location of both of them. But yeah, that's how you do multiple lines of text on a model now rather than the old single text effect with multiple. It will automatically convert any existing text effects to multiple text effects and add any layers if necessary to make that work. Okay, there's a bunch of changes that Gil's made to various effects to better support the Superstar. So he's been trying to do some Superstar imports and he's hit some problems, and so he's made some changes. So he's added shimmer options and a bunch of other things as well. He's also made some changes to the fill effect. You remember the fill effect? This is the one that lets you define a curve to control it. Well, he's now defined he's got offsets and skip sizes and whatever else. So a whole bunch of new options that he's got here. I'm not entirely sure what the skip settings do. I imagine they're very similar to the way the morph works, and the morph's never made a lot of sense to me either. It's very powerful, but it's very confusing. Oh, the timing effect jump in VU meter. Okay, well this one's a little bit more straightforward. So in VU meter, there's a new one here called jump. Where is it? Timing event jump. There we go. You have to choose a timing track, which I have, the Metronome. What it should be doing is it should be, oh, I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. You need a musical sequence. I promise you I won't play it. Okay, so we need a timing track. Let's go and create a metronome one. You do that up in sequence settings, timings, new metronome. Okay, 500 milliseconds, which is a half second. Done. VU meter on our matrix. I don't think it did. Okay. I'll drop it down there. Timing event jump on the 500 milliseconds. Okay. And so what it does is every time it hits a timing mark, it jumps up, but the distance it jumps up is the volume of the music at that point. And so you get this regular leap up and then fall away. The bars, I think, controls how quickly it falls. You can see you get this sort of this pulse along with the beat potentially. In fact, it's pretty close to the beat, I've got to say. And it jumps up to that amount and it falls away again. So a slightly new spin on the effect. And increasing the fan radius. So Gil's done this. If anyone had used the fan, if you used it on an all-house model, what could happen is that there were limitations on how big you could make it. And now you can set it much higher. I think it was limited to 200, now it goes to 500. So if you're using something like this on the all-house model, it can cover pretty much all the models in your house, whereas previously it wouldn't do that. Okay, piano. Pretty sure no one uses piano, but okay. So one of the things that piano was frustrating to use. Even with my rewrite, it still wasn't happy with it. And one of the things that frustrated me with it was I had all these options for how you create the timings, and most of them didn't work very well. In fact, the one that worked the best was creating a timing track. And so what I created was a new one called Import Notes. And Import Notes is where you can go off and use all the various options for how you want to create the notes. There's a new one here called the Music XML file. This is an open file format for sharing music scores, but you can also use your Audacity timing file. You just have to grab one. I think I have one in here. Click OK. And instead of being hidden away where you couldn't actually see what was going on, it actually brings it in and creates a timing track for you where you can see the notes that it's going to want to play. And you can also go in and you can edit this if you want to. You can move it around and do all of those sorts of things, whereas previously you couldn't. You were basically stuck with whatever it did in the background, and you had to hope that it was right or it was what you wanted it to do. So now you have that ability to bring something in and then maybe edit it later to be, you know, if you're not quite happy with the notes that came in or the exact timing, they don't exactly match your music or whatever. And because these notes are well outside the range, you've actually got to increase the size of the piano in order to see anything. Anyway, so piano works a lot better. It's a lot more reliable. You can set up, import multiple notes, choose the one that best suits you. It's a lot easier to use than the old one was. The reason that's not working is because I didn't set it to notes. So now you've got much more transparency over where it's getting its notes from and what notes it's getting. It also doesn't have to keep going back and rescanning the file because now the notes is saved as a timing track, which means next time you use it, it's a lot faster. So color curves give you what value curves did, but with color. So what you can do is you can take something like, I don't know, here's a spiral. Let's give it some color. But what happens if I didn't want white, but I actually wanted that to start red and turn green? Well, if you right click on the color, right, we did that, right? So if you left click on the color, of course, it gives you the normal color change dialog box, so you can change the color of that one. Well, I can also right click on it now, and I can choose one of these predefined gradients. It's a nice rainbow color. And so that particular color, while it's being used, will change over the duration of the effect. So as you can see here, it starts at red and goes through to blue. So at the very beginning of the effect, it will be red, and it will move away through, and by the time it gets to the end, it will be blue. If you want to edit it, that's cool. Just right click on it again, bring it up, and you can start changing it. This is using a gradient where it slowly moves between. There's also a none, which will just change in hard steps the color from one to the next. We can go back to gradient again. If you don't like the gradient, let's say we don't like that, we really wouldn't prefer that to be green. If you double click on the color bar, you can go in and change that, and we can make that, let's say, purple, and it will replace it with purple at that point. You can, of course, move them left and right. If you want to add a new one, just go in between where it's a cross, click it, and it'll add a new one. By default, they're black, but that's okay. You can go and change it. Make it orange. Right. If you like that color curve and you think, well, actually, that's something I want to do, you can export it. By default, it will go into your current folder, which is not the folder, which is my show directory. So what I'll do is I'll save it in my show directory, and I don't know, I'll call it, let's call it weird, if you can spell. And you can see that by doing that, what it's done is it's added it down here into the presets. So the next time I want to reuse this one, I'll just be able to click on it and bring it back and reuse it. You can have up to 40 color stops across the curve, so you can change the color lots and lots of times. But it then only runs through it once over the course of the effect. So if you want to change it multiple times, you can, of course, go, I can go red, green, back to red. Right, that's all okay. That's what I want to do. Pretty much every effect up here respects the color curve. There's only one or two that don't. Fire won't, because it doesn't recognize it. The DMX one won't. Even the state effect, I think, does. There's not many that don't. Pretty much everything. Oh, the video effect, of course, won't, because it takes the colors out of the video. But pretty much everything else will respect that color curve. You can have as many as you like. You can have up to 8 different color curves across here. If you want to change it back to a single color, again, left click on it and select the color, and it's back to what it was. Playback speed. Gil added this. He, previously, when you had a song, you could slow down the song, but you couldn't do it when you were in when you were using an animation. But now you can. It will slow it down, and so it's now playing at a much slower frames per second. All right, allow multiple layers for strands. Okay, so as many of you may have known, you can actually open up any model into its strands and even down to its nodes, which is a crazy way to sequence, but some people like to do it. What Dan's done is he's allowed you to add multiple layers. You previously, I don't believe you were able to add multiple layers underneath a strand, and so you couldn't do blended effects. So yeah, so basically you can, I'm not going to play with it anymore, but you can define, you can use the layers down on the strand level, whereas previously you couldn't. You could only put one thing on a strand if you were sequencing at that level. Not that many people do. And finally, you can rename timing tracks. You could do this before, but it was hidden up in the settings here. Now you can go and rename the timing track. We can call him Fred. And if you've built any effects like the piano or something that's dependent upon timing tracks, it will actually be updated and recognize the fact that that timing track's changed and continue to work. That's all of the things in 46. There was one other thing I wanted to show you in 47. Sorry, the debugger's a little bit slower. All right. So you've all played with value curves by now. So here's a simple ramp up down. Let's say I wanted to go to halfway up. There we go. I can now export this value curve, and we're going to call him half up down. And what he'll do is he'll appear here on this list. I can go and create a sine wave, and I can decide I'm going to put one like that, export it, call him my sine. So this is coming in the next release. And now when you come into the value curves, you'll have these predefined value curves that are exactly the way you want them, that you can just click on rather than having to go up and fiddle with the value curve settings every time you do it, which should make a huge difference for how quick people can sequence with those value curves. And I think that was the last thing I wanted to show that's changed. Now, there's been a bunch of other bug fixes and the like, but they should have worked in the first place. I've chosen not to spend a great deal of time on those.